Hello and welcome to the final episode of Gemini Rising for 2025. I can't believe that we're already at the end of the year. Joining me as always is my co-host Anne Wohlcke.
Hello.
And today's guest, which is a perfect way to wrap up the year and have a look into 2026, is Astrologer Peter Guthries, also known on Instagram as Ascend with Pete. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So good to be here.
And also a fellow Aussie, which I love.
Yes, as you can probably tell by my accent immediately.
Every time someone over here says to me, "Oh, you're from Australia," I look at them with a deadpan face and say, "What gave it away?" And they look at me very confused. I'm like, "No, I get it. I sound different." So I thought before we get into what we're going to be looking at in terms of the astrology for 2026, we should just have a quick chat about the fact that you are a Hellenistic astrologer. And we should talk about the difference between mundane astrology, evolutionary astrology, and all the other different types of astrology that are around.
Yeah. So the most important thing, I guess, to note about when we're talking about, I kind of like to just be like modern astrology versus Hellenistic astrology, because they're very, very different traditions. And traditional astrology, when we talk about traditional astrology, Hellenistic, medieval, Renaissance astrology, these are all, I guess, rediscovered old new things. So in the last 20 to 30 years, we've been really lucky to have a lot of classic scholars that have started picking up astrological texts from Greco-Roman era, medieval, Renaissance, and started translating them very well, and like taking it on their backs to try and learn the language of astrology from back in those times and put it back in, I think from a historical point of view first, and then astrologers are like, this is fantastic. We get all this information that we haven't had access to for thousands of years. And so the traditional revival is what they call it. And in the 90s, there was also the team called Project Hindsight, which was a group of Roberts. They were all named Robert. And one of the main modern astrologers, Robert Hand, was also involved in that too. They have kind of brought traditional astrology back. And so the main difference between modern and traditional is that modern astrology was kind of a fragmented tradition where we only had bits and pieces. And then also there was this push in the early 1900s, late 1800s to simplify and kind of condense astrology into something that anybody could try and relate to. And so there was this kind of, I guess, its own, in history, we've never looked at the sun sign as the predominant factor of someone's astrology. That's only a modern tradition. Everything before that was rising sign and kind of holistically chart related. Traditional astrology, the main thing when you learn traditional astrology is we start looking at day versus night charts, which makes a big difference as to how someone's chart's going to express. And you can think, if you're thinking about the sky and our environment as a symbolic, I guess, feature of what's going on kind of everywhere in our lives, personally, psychologically, then obviously day versus night is the biggest distinction of any given moment. So that was a big thing that came back. We got a lot of terminology around benefic and malefic planets, like planets that do good, planets that do harm, and like objectively speaking, of course, and being able to know dynamically what someone's life's going to be like, not just contextually or psychologically. So we got this massive kind of like increase in information just based on even just those two things, and how one's chart would differ from, from another person's. And then obviously coming back to rising sign astrology, like the chart as a holistic kind of symbol, as opposed to just your sun sign, your moon sign, maybe your rising sign. So we're very, very lucky to be astrologically minded in this time, because we've never had more information about astrology. We've never had a more complete system. And every day we have astrologers increasing our understanding of astrology. And like, if you were to put it on a chart, it'd be like skyrocketing right now. We are becoming so astrologically aware, it's not funny. So, and obviously modern was most predominantly based on like relational compatibility, psychological, I guess, insight, and all those things. And those things don't get like thrown out because they're so useful. But teaming that with the basis that traditional astrology brings back, it's like a full system of like, you know, when I'm reading someone's chart, I can see into their lives, like from the objective all the way to the subjective, which is really cool.
All right. So when you end a sentence with that, now I'm curious to know, where do you look in someone's chart for the subjective and the objective?
So the same symbols will say both at the same time. Once you learn the dynamic principles of the planets, their temperament, and how they behave, and what circumstances they enjoy to be in, what they don't like to be in. There's this whole kind of scheme of like rejoicing, where like a planet would prefer to be in its kind of masculine, feminine sign, night or day, rising before or after the sun. There's all of these considerations that go into understanding how the planet is feeling in that moment. Mm-hmm. And then that will bring out how that's going to come out in life circumstances. And then also you're looking at that planet's position in the chart, the houses it rules, the planets it's aspecting. So that's all the dynamic stuff. And then you've got the zodiac comes in, and the zodiac can be dynamic in the sense that it's like if a planet is in a sign it likes to be in or not. But then you've also got the psychological element of that sign, and I guess the subjective, because the zodiac is much more subjective than it is objective. The zodiac is much more like kind of like the filter or the characteristics of what a planet is doing at any given time, and that kind of comes out. So it's like it's all built into the same information. It's just about understanding those symbols on the deepest level possible. So same chart with that extra information, with that kind of ancient text kind of information, you can really start to see kind of almost every dimension of someone's life. Mm-hmm. So like I would use that basically to understand how to deliver the objective to the person subjectively as well, which is really cool. So it comes into like the counseling element of an astrological reading as well, of like, how would this person best receive me telling them that this planet isn't saying very nice things about a certain aspect of their life. Yeah.
Right.
Did you have a follow-up, Anne? I felt like there was another question.
Oh, I always have a follow-up. So, you know, what
Not
I was...
too bad. Having two Gemini risings.
Yeah, I know. What I was thinking about is this: the historical charts that I've looked at, a lot of times, you know, I'll be looking at a really, you know, maybe a medieval person, and you think there's no way there's a time for this chart. And there's always a time for those early charts. Mm-hmm. But then when you get into maybe the early 19th century, the late 1800s, or I mean the early 20th century, late 19th century, you won't find a time. But you find out from the early world, anyone who was important, they knew what time they were born.
It was kind of almost like a luxury. It is still a luxury, a privilege. They call it the birth time privilege. But it was kind of, I almost see that as almost like an awareness, like an actual awareness thing of like, we didn't realize how important that moment was in that time. And that's why, you know, in this modern society, it's still kind of strange to know your birth time. If you do, mostly because you're looking at your astrology. But I think that's a very symbolic kind of idea of where we were at spiritually and awareness wise, is like we weren't looking at the system in which we were being created by. So yeah, you'll have like Da Vinci's and all these people with like charts from like 400, 500, 600 plus years ago, where we know their time for sure, which is just, it's insane to me too. It's a great privilege to have those too, because you can go like these really influential figures that have withstood the test of time. And we can look at their chart and go, oh, this is the kind of life they lived. And this is what, when you know astrology so well, you can basically just experience what life was like for them. And not only just the kind of mid-heaven-y kind of like what their results of their life were, the achievements, but also what it would have felt like to be them on a daily basis. Or, you know, you always look at celebrity charts and realize that like not the fame, you can see in the charts like where their fame comes from, and then also their experience of their life that might not be so glamorous as well. You can see where their kind of Achilles heels are and stuff like that. So it's, I think people in America are a lot more sensitive to like giving birth data out because of how much they realize it's a very personal, all-telling thing, a birth chart. In Australia, we're still kind of like, no one really takes it that seriously. But I think in America, it's you know, you'll have astrologers that will not give out their birth data and stuff like that. But here, it's a little bit more like, here's my chart. Yeah.
Do you think we exist in a time where more people are turning to astrology and other sort of forms, you know, human design, things like that, to get information about themselves and how to move through this world? Or do you feel that we're in a moment where people are turning away from that and maybe more towards organized religion? Just in what you're encountering.
Whoa, that's a really good question. And that's something I've been paying a lot of attention to because I think Saturn in Pisces as a transit since March 2023 has brought religion very, very, very far to the front, where otherwise it wasn't so loud. And I think that I think it's both. And I think Pisces is very good at encapsulating both too. That we are having an increase in seeking what meaning what really means, because Pisces kind of asks that question of like, what's the purpose of being here? What's the most important reason to be alive? Or like, you know, it's obviously subjective to the individual, but that's what Saturn's really been kind of pressuring Pisces for, is like, what's the point of this? And then immediately you go to, well, what's happening? The question is, what is this experience we're having, and what philosophically do we believe that allows us to create this kind of the opposite of Pisces is Virgo, a plan or a strategy for life? And so I think that both of those things are happening. I don't think people are necessarily, I mean, there's definitely the pipeline of spiritualist person to devout Christian. That's something I see a lot. But I also think that the average person is much more open to the idea that astrology is real. And a lot of my clients, you know, even though I'm a Hellenistic kind of deep in the tradition astrologer, most of my clients are like brand new to astrology. And I'm teaching people astrology for the first time, which is like a massive honor because it's, you know, what I wish I had when I first started. So I think that teamed with all of the predominance of air that we're coming into, I think that people are asking questions after a long period of not wanting to know, because we're coming from Earth, which is like, frankly, like Earth as a predominating energy, like the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions or the Great Mutation of 250 years of Earth conjunctions, which we're just coming out of. We had a very restricted worldview. It was much more about preserving what we knew than expanding, which obviously is air, which is what we're coming into now, very firmly now. So I think that astrology and human design and any idea of like using like natural mechanics of time and space, which is what astrology is a perfectly a perfect tool for what we're moving into, is greater awareness and asking bigger philosophical questions about why we do what we do. And without that, you know, it's really hard to know what, you know, especially in this moment. I think most people are just like, what are we supposed to be doing right now? Because obviously with all of the incoming astrology of 2026 and how uncertain the world feels, I think naturally it's like, well, what do I do tomorrow? You know, what is the intention for now? Because the future seems so uncertain. I think that naturally brings a question of like, I want help with that. I want to seek kind of reassurance. I want to seek greater awareness, all these things. So I think I see that the movement towards Christianity and religion as the same thing. And you know what? I've never been religious myself, but I've always been open and curious. That I guess that's my Sagittarian in me, Pisces rising too. That the religious side of things, kind of, if you do it with integrity, kind of takes you to the same place. It kind of takes you to the same place of like, we're all just here doing what we're meant to be doing. Don't get so caught up in what's going on outside of you. Just focus on what you can do for the world and what your role is. And I think that that's what also the faded kind of traditional version of astrology also takes you to, is like the whole Stoic philosophy that was really prominent around the Hellenistic era, which was you can't control the outside world, all you can control is your response to it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what also people get out of the religion side of things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know anyone who could have gone through the last 5 years and not be curious about astrology. You know, you need to figure out, why did all that just happen? What's going on right now?
Yeah.
And we have a blueprint.
Exactly right. It was really interesting because I kind of became an astrologer post, like kind of in the end of 2020. And I've kind of crammed a lot of learning in a very short period of time. But I remember coming into it being like, like everyone's just talking about 2020 as if they've been talking about it for like years and years and years and years, because they had. Most astrologers that were like practicing were like, whatever happens late 2020, late 2019 to early 2020 is going to be incredible. Like I remember even Chris Brennan, who's one of the main astrologers that I follow, was like, there'll be no hugging in March of 2020. And then lockdowns and social distancing and stuff like that. So it's kind of, it's ridiculous how 1-to-1 the astrology versus the reality is, because obviously there isn't any difference. But back then I wasn't that sure.
Yeah.
I always tell the story that I was following the Leo King, had been for years, and he was talking about the astrology of 2020. And when I go back, he was completely accurate in what he was saying, but I was listening to what he was saying through the lens that I had of life experience, and I understood what he was saying, but I pictured it completely differently. And we actually did a sit-down interview. We did one in 2018, which was more focused on him. And then we did a second one in 2019. And I said, listen, I've been following you. I've been listening to Deep Astrology every week for the last, however many years. You keep talking about 2020. Should I be scared? He's like, no. And then I remember the first time we did Full Disclosure together, I sat down, I said, I have a bone to pick with you. And he goes, well, you're fine. Was there anything to be scared of? And I went, well, no, but I realized, I realized how accurate you were, and I completely misunderstood it. And so there were people with astrologers, and I don't think it was just with him, but saying, you were wrong, you were wrong. And I sit back and go, no, they weren't wrong. It was your understanding of what you're being
your
told,
expectations.
When it's something that we haven't seen before. Because we talk about slavery now and we think about it modern day. So corporations underpaying people, certain buildings being put up so that the staff can get free housing, but then they're kind of trapped because there's not enough money to pay for themselves. All of this human trafficking in terms of adults for work, all of that is considered slavery. But people talk about slavery and they think about the cotton
like
field.
It's in the past.
Back in the day, you hear about a plague and you think of the Black Plague. You don't think of a modern day plague. So for me, that was really the interesting part of the astrology through that period.
This is the biggest teaching of astrology when you come into astrology, is you realize, there is no real, we don't, the past is always with us. We're always repeating the past. That the thing of history always repeats itself because we're in a circle, and it might be a very complex, very kind of intense, always changing, never the same day kind of circle, but we're still in a circle. And, it's really amazing when you start looking at recurrence transits and you go, well, what happens every Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which is really, that's happening in February. And you go and look at that and you'd be like, there's some nuances about this that will be different, but the core, very deep, truth of those two planets and their significations will come through, and you will see the repeat. And then, so that's what I call myself ascend with Pete. I don't mean it in literally I'm not a mega spiritual person, and I never have been, but that's my version of ascending, is by knowing the universe intimately and the way it operates, we become more intelligent by default, because we can see the way that the world works. And I'm a massive believer in nothing happens that's wrong. If we're saying it should have been this way or it's wrong, then we're immediately outside of reality. But that's the main thing I learned learning astrology, was okay, this is always this thing that I just experienced. I'll experience that again, and in a similar way with just different context or something like that. and you will always come back, and there's always a pendulum swing. We always have our good moments, our bad moments, and especially within the natal chart, we're always going to experience something like the thing we just experienced again in some way. So whether that's a really good moment or a really bad moment, we kind of like start to build this really robust worldview, and nothing starts to surprise us, which is ultimately happiness. Is we're not being shocked. Our expectations aren't way up here and they're not way down here. You know, we're kind of in this equilibrium of expecting most of what happens, which is what a lot of my clients come back and say, like, it's good to know these things ahead so that when they happen, I just respond to them instead of go into a mental spiral and have an anxious breakdown, because that shouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to ask one quick follow-up to that. And I tend to ask every astrologer that we have on the show, but I'm curious as to your thoughts, because on social media, you've talked about how things are fated and everything happens as it's meant to, and which I agree with. But at the same time, do you think it's possible to ascend certain transits? Because, and the reason I ask this, you've just talked about how the astrology can give you the information, so it's easier to weather whatever the transit is, whether it be good or bad. And I've always thought that having that information allows you to go, okay, this may be tough, but I do logically understand. I'm not going to mentally spiral because I knew this was coming. It's not as bad as I thought. And so you get through it. Whereas there are other people who are more fatalistic and go, this is a terrible transit. And they kind of surrender, but they surrender to it being completely awful and don't think you can move through it in a positive way. So I'm just curious about your thoughts.
This is my favorite question. This is my favorite. This is the reason why I became an astrologer. This is what is important to talk about. My belief is that everything is fated. So even your awareness of a transit is astrologically timed. So there's not anything that is outside of what you're meant. Like, so if we look at the birth chart, and the way the ancients looked at it, they looked at it as an as above, so below kind of configuration, where everything above the horizon is consciousness and awareness and free will and choice. And everything below is of fixity and body and like, confined reality. Those two things are like this symbiotic relationship where both of them are true at the same time. And there's this thread underneath them, which it kind of reminds me of the Holy Trinity in Christianity, like the trio of entities, where there's consciousness, unconsciousness, and then everything underneath it. There's a timeline that is controlling both of those things simultaneously that moves in the same fashion, which is astrologically represented. And so your awareness at any given moment is also just as fated as your unconscious behaviors. So the thought to go and seek astrology, find astrology, learn astrology, see astrology, watch that transit, and then your predisposition to that information based on your birth chart would have you either go, this is going to be great, or this is going to be bad. And that, because that predisposition is going to be also timed within your birth chart to say, this person's going to look at this and go, that's going to suck, creates that reality. That's going to be amazing, creates that reality. So while all of that kind of, I guess, more modern language around spirituality and philosophy is true, it doesn't step outside of the fated situation that we're in. It is part of it. And so your awareness, your like interests, your experiences, and how they make you behave and change. And, this is unfortunately the Pluto, Mercury, Jupiter in me in Scorpio, which is like, I feel like I've had this sense of everything is exactly the way it's meant to be. And I feel like I say this to a lot of people. I was like, I feel like I had this sense of what's not possible at every, like if someone suggests do this, I would just have this feeling of like, that's not happening, and that came across to a lot of people as pessimistic. But when I found the tool of astrology, I'm like, that's why that's why I feel that way, because I'm sensitive to that, the transit that I wasn't aware of prior, and also, so it's a really tricky question. And it's probably you probably notice in my feed, I have a lot of pointed language around this stuff, because I feel like fate acceptance is actually healing. I think that at the core of it, understanding the world, the way it works in its deepest truth, which I think astrology, Hellenistic astrology or traditional astrology, gets us the closest that we've ever gotten. allows us to kind of realize that gripping the wheel so tightly and believing that every thought and every decision we make is going to, you know, either mean we fail or succeed is actually a lot of our suffering. And that when we stop gripping the wheel so tightly and realize, oh, this thing actually is kind of autonomous. I'm in an autonomous vehicle that's taking me somewhere, and I'm here to just kind of like, in some ways, pretend that I'm in full control, but enjoy the ride. Then that's, I mean, having Pluto on my Mercury and Jupiter's my chart ruler. Like, I've spent a lot of time in my life just mega anxious, just terrified of the future, like not looking forward to it, thinking everything's going to go terribly, or seeing all the possibilities of things going terribly. And astrology, given it's also in my 9th house, astrology has allowed me to feel more calm and trusting of the world, because one, I can see it, and Scorpio loves to see what's going to happen, or like all the details of what's happening. But yeah, I think that's where the fated conversation comes for me, is if we have the access to the information, then we should probably know it, and not, it's tricky too, because I've got the Sag sun that wants to be really optimistic and hopeful and hates when things don't go my way. Yeah, that's my main kind of contribution to the spiritual conversation, is that, and I think it's kind of like an intentional kind of like ironic comment to be like ascend with Pete, because the ascension I'm talking about there is by being more aware of your condition, you are kind of coming out of the darkness of, I am charged with knowing exactly what I'm going to do for the rest of my life in this moment, which is never was never yours to hold. But the modern age has taken that on and been like, and it's very earth dominant for that to be like, we've been since the early 1800s, we've been in an earth dominant culture, and we're leaving that now. And you can see that through how everyone's changing the way they think, the way they act, everything about the way people are living at the moment. We're going from an earth attitude to an air attitude, and earth is very like, everything about me and my outcomes is important: status, money, materialisticness, if that's even a word, and the 3 triplicity rulers, or the planets that are in charge of the earth element, are Venus, Mars, and Moon. So they're very, very close, very personal kind of planets, the body planets, the aesthetics planets, the more kind of surface level stuff. So it's very interesting to go to air, and then we're going Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter. And so immediately it's much more philosophical, much more big picture thinking. It's got Saturn involved, so it's a little bit more rational and, wise and that sort of thing. So it's a really beautiful time. It's like, it's kind of funny because the modern spiritual language is correct, but add the fate thing on top of it and it's perfect. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. It wasn't too rambly.
Yeah,
you did perfectly.
Yeah. So I think that now I'm getting more about the Ascend with Pete title also, because I was just sitting here thinking, okay, so you decided you wanted to ascend because you had this chart designed for ascension. And then in the midst of that, exploring this idea of ascending, you've had Saturn and Neptune going across your ascendant, or in your 12th house and across your ascendant. So yeah, what's that
Saturn's
been like?
Literally on my ascendant right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just thought that was
no, that's, I've just wondered what that experience was like.
Complete confusion into complete certainty. Like, Neptune was like, I'm letting go of all, very Neptunian. I'm letting go of all things that I thought I knew. And Saturn's like, I'm very certain all of a sudden. And that's different for me too. Wow. I mean, having I'm a Saturn Pisces as well. So I'm a Saturn return person right now. Oh. And to have the Saturn return, which is around 6 degrees of Pisces. So I had it really early on in Pisces cycle. And then Neptune, Saturn over my ascendant. It's gone from feeling like I know nothing to feeling very certain about what I believe and what's real. So while it wasn't very fun, I'm very grateful to be on this side of it now. And Saturn's just stationed direct on my ascendant, and it felt very like, for the first time in my life, I think I know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
That's good. That's a great thing. I can tell you, Natalie and I are really tired of Neptune and very tired of Saturn at this point. So, as everybody probably is who's aware of it.
My part. Yeah, you go.
Oh no, please keep going.
I was just going to say very quickly, my partner has 5 placements in Pisces, all within the last decade. So she's got Mercury at 20, Moon, Mars at 25, Saturn at 27, and the Sun at 28. So this household is very done with Saturn and Neptune.
Yeah.
I was just going to say I have a stellium in Pisces. So I've got Mars, Mercury, Venus. And so Mars and Mercury are conjunct. My south node is there. My midheaven is there. It's just
wild. Yeah,
and
it's
Saturn right now is conjunct Mars and Mercury for me. And I'm just like, can you just get out? Get out. And then it's moving into my 10th and will eventually conjunct my sun. But at this moment, I would rather that, because these planets, Neptune on Mars almost killed me. It was like I was asleep or needed to just sleep for 2 whole years. It was torturous.
Completely takes your ability to move away, right? Like it's, if you think about Mars's movement, Neptune, Mars, it's like, I don't know where to go. My partner's very, very similar. So she spent a long time with Neptune there being like, it doesn't feel like there's any solutions to my problems. I can't move any way and get any results. Like Neptune's just like, you kind of have to just wait, and almost like the wisdom of Neptune being like in the inaction or the absence of action, you'll find yourself in the right place. Adam Ellenbas, which is another traditional astrologer I follow, he speaks about Neptune as like, you kind of got to just take the breadcrumbs. You just got to take the next forward thing. You're not able to look 3 years in the future, because it's not any guess you would have would be wrong as to what you'd be doing or where you'd be. And having that also over Venus, it also depends on what those planets are ruling in your chart. And it's such a complex little story with those outer planets. That's why you can't take the outer planets out of the situation, even if you're a traditional astrologer, because they're just so potent. And even right now, having Pluto squaring my Venus at the moment, that's a pretty visceral experience as well. And but I'm very looking forward to, even though Saturn's going to now move into an opposition with my Moon, like I'm just keen for something different.
It's going to be opposing my Moon too.
Yay. Yeah. It's really fun too when you start looking at day versus night charts. And if you look, like, I'm a day chart because I got the sun in the 10th, and so Saturn is more productive for a person in a day chart. So it's like I can go, okay, well, whatever it's going to be uncomfortable, but I'm going to get something really meaningful out of it. Whereas some clients I have that have those sort of transits with Saturn Saturn acting as a night chart, Saturn is like, well, we're going to have to accept that some things are just going to wash over us and we're not going to have any say in how that goes. Or it's like, we're going to have to let go of something, or, it's a very good tool for understanding what a transit's going to actually play out like, as opposed to, whatever else we would have talked about otherwise.
Well, would you be able to just briefly summarize for people who maybe don't know this type of astrology?
Yeah.
What's the difference between a day and night chart, or how does somebody tell? And then, generally, what does that mean when you're looking at the transits? Which planets are more favorable, or how do you analyze it from that perspective?
So it's always subjective to the individual's chart, depending on like the placements and how they're conditioned, how the planets are conditioned by their sign, their house, the aspects to other planets and that sort of thing. But as a general rule, if your sun is above the ascendant descendant line, so if you've got the sun in the top half of your chart, that's a day chart. If it's really close to the ascendant, you need to kind of like look at it a bit deeper and do a little bit of rectification and see, what's going on there. But the technique itself is called sect, which is another word for teams, which divides the planets up into night or nocturnal and diurnal, so day and night planets. The day ones are Sun, Jupiter, and Saturn, and the night ones are Moon, Mars, Venus. And so, depending on whether you're day or night chart, it would make the opposite team of planets, kind of almost like the shadow government or the opposing party. That's probably the best way, like political terms, where the malefic or the more challenging planet, Mars or Saturn, that is opposite, which we call contrary to the sect, is the planet that's going to give you the most grief, because it is not operating in favor with the reigning power or the planets of the sect. So in a day chart, Mars is more challenging, and you can also see that, like in a day chart, the day is already of the nature of heat and brightness and fieriness, and so Mars is exacerbated in a day chart. That's kind of how that works. And then in a night chart, Saturn's already cold and dry and austere, and has themes of like kind of danger and whatever, from the more Saturnian element. In a night chart is exacerbated. So you kind of want Saturn in a day chart, Mars in a night chart, so to speak. And then therefore the planet that is corresponding to the sect of the chart, so a day chart would be Jupiter, which would be the best planet because Jupiter is of the day. And then in a night chart, Venus. And so just that technique in and of itself puts almost 80% of the context of a birth chart back into it. Like, it is so incredible how much information that gives you. And then you look at the planet and say, well, where am I, if a client was like, where am I most blessed or like gifted? I'll be like, okay, well, your day chart with Jupiter. So Jupiter in its position, Jupiter's affecting aspects. So whatever planets Jupiter is affecting, and then also the houses Jupiter rules are all the places in the chart, which would theoretically be some of the better places. There is this really beautiful like spectrum of experiences that comes through there, where if you have a really good benefic of sect like Jupiter in a day chart, like really well placed, like Sagittarius in the 10th house, like awesome. That means that the higher end of your life in terms of experiences, more objectively, of course, is really nice. And then say you have Mars in its exaltation of Capricorn in a day chart, which theoretically is Mars where he wants to be, just as the more challenging role, but then actually brings up Mars's capacity for damage, and brings that spectrum really high, so the worst experiences are kind of like mitigated by that. But therefore, if Mars was in a really challenging place, that would bring the challenges down. So I think it's really important, this technique, because we want to make sure that we are, when we're reading for a client or when we're talking to a client, that we're like on their level. And if they've got a Mars in Cancer, which is Mars's theoretical like worst place, they're having a Mars Cancer experience. And for me to say like it's really warm and cuddly and cozy just wouldn't match up to what their experience of that is. It would be messy, kind of emotionally reckless and impulsive, like feelings of lack of control in life. Like this language is really important to be like, this is what you're actually experiencing. And as soon as we get on that level, there's a lot of astrologers that really kind of feel very sensitive to speaking to these things. But what I find with my clients is they come in wanted to be seen fully. They want you to see exactly what their experience is. And so I go, this is the kind of experience you maybe had, talking about it, more challenging stuff. And they're like, you're right. That's exactly what it's been. It's been like that. And they're not worrying about, is that going to be the way it is forever? They're just like, oh, finally someone understands this dynamic in my life, because we're all, my main criticism of modern astrology is that it's really, really not great at looking at the challenging stuff, and not really great at being able to conceptualize or philosophically approach challenging stuff. Because if we think about it as a completely fated thing, I guess we're worried that we're going to condemn someone to something. But at the end of the day, their spectrum is their spectrum, and they're going to have better moments and worse moments within their spectrum, which is going to feel the same as someone that has a really good if they've got both their planets that kind of team out their spectrum, like someone having their worst moment that has pretty good worst moments will still experience their worst moments the way someone down here will experience their moments. And like, we can look externally and go, yeah, well, that person that has this really unfortunate experience, that's obviously much worse than this person. But at the same time, the experience is just what it is. Like, the really interesting development in quantum theory, where they realize that the atom is adaptable to the observer, not vice versa. That's the world that we live in, is the world is performing to the individual. And the crazy thing about that is we can have 4 people in a room, and the atoms, like the world will somehow contort to all 4 persons' experiences in that room, and somehow those things are all faded together. It's just incredible. So I don't know if that's too much, but it's something that I really love talking about, because it's kind of almost like this underdog kind of like perspective in astrology that I think a lot of the healing comes from. Is
Right.
it's like great. It's great to look at the really good things in a chart, but how you deal with the bad things in a chart is what makes the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really useful to me, because I do have a nighttime chart. And I think with nighttime charts, you hear more negative about, oh no, you have a nighttime chart. But I think it's a matter of knowing, well, you have a different experience with the planets. And you need to understand, like you said, how each planet's going to be affecting you. So
yeah, I think that there's so much, and we still haven't really explored it properly. Like, this is still new information to us. But the beautiful thing, like, I don't necessarily think of like sun or moon as night or day as more favorable to the other, because it's just like it just changes which things which planets are more predominant, really. And I think that there's an element of like, there's a part of me as a sun chart person, a day chart person, that kind of fantasizes about what it'd be like to live in a night chart world, and have Venus as the more predominant positive planet and Saturn more challenging. Like, that would be a much different experience of the world, and has its benefits as well as its drawbacks. Like, it all kind of equalizes out in the end, and no one's really missing out to some extent. But yeah, it's just good to know, like, when you have a transit of Saturn, knowing that Saturn is more challenging for you than any of the other planets. So it makes sense that you're tired of Saturn. And
especially in the 10th house, it's kind of been wild.
And I mean, and Saturn Pisces, just out of all the places Saturn can be, and like, speaking from experience, is such a wild, it's a very austere place to have Saturn. But then otherwise, like, you have like a major Mars transit, and it might be triumphant and glorious as well. So like, it's either or. Having a Saturn transits last longer, so that's one drawback of Saturn. But Mars transits are more stabby and more acute. So there's kind of all there's just so much to go. Like, I think there's a lot of textbooks to come about these specifics of that as well. So really appreciate you guys asking these questions and giving me a chance to chat about it, because I think this is still something that's very new that I'd like to think that more people can adopt, and it can collectively change our relationship to astrology.
I just really like the description of Mars transits. They're stabby. I'm like, you know what? That's so accurate.
Yeah. I mean, being a day chart person, Mars is my most challenging planet, and like, most of my experiences of negative Mars transits have been car crashes or speeding fines, or mostly automotive, but injuries and Martian things like that. But it's just really interesting, kind of having a major Mars transit and then feeling kind of Mars like aggressive or angry or flustered or frustrated. But then I can imagine being a night chart person with Saturn feels very opposite, like almost the complete opposite of feeling like not having control, or feeling completely suppressed, or inability to act or something like that, or being kind of like limited. So I love, I guess, every time I have a session with a client, like, I'm seeing the world from a completely different lens, and that's really like amazing. And I see I see stuff that isn't very nice as well, but it's still very curious. Like, from an objective level, it's really interesting to see the world expressing itself in all these different ways.
So, I mean, we need to have a look at the year ahead, and we're already 45 minutes into this. But just before we move on to 2026, I wanted your thoughts on the current energy, because let me tell you, I'm not having a good time. And most people that I know are feeling very challenged at the moment, for lack of a better word. Everybody's frustrated. Everybody's tired. And so I'm curious as to your thoughts on what part of that is the astrology and what part of it is just end of year sort of energy that seems to come around every December, where as in Australia, summer is happening.
Capricorn season.
Yeah, people are getting ready to sort of celebrate. Here, it's obviously winter. And so things get quiet, but we don't close down the same way Australia does. But everyone seems to get tired in December.
Yeah, I mean, for one, I guess that's just, Capricorn season, especially. Capricorn season is always like the sun is vitality and energy. So it's in Capricorn, which is austere and, sunken and, depressed. And, generally there's more like tiresome traits. But the moment right now, we're in a very interesting holding pattern between a kind of world that we've been in for about a year and a bit, potentially up to 2.5 years with Saturn in Pisces. That's all about to shift all at once with a Neptune component in there with Saturn Neptune. So like globally, we're all feeling this kind of like society is changing and the truth that we're all integrating with is changing. And so it's not really clear what is about to happen. And that's kind of like the last time we had a Saturn Neptune was 1989. And that was a very challenging kind of austere, tiresome time as well, where like things had been so challenging for so long that suddenly, the Saturn Neptune kind of brings this sudden mutation into new things. But in this very moment, what we're experiencing is like Jupiter's been in Cancer since June, which has been relatively positive, relatively helpful, coming out of Jupiter in Gemini, which is not so helpful and positive. But we've got kind of like this elastic band effect where we might have felt like we had a lot of progression and development and potential through May to September with Saturn's early entrance into Aries, where there was this boost of energy and maybe this motivation to kind of push forward after a period of feeling Saturn in Pisces, which is very like, I don't know where I'm going, what I'm doing, what matters most, going through this process of like realizing what isn't working and what we need to subtract before we can add again. We're in this kind of holding pattern before we kind of get into that addition phase of Saturn and Aries, which is like, well, I'll just, I'm kind of getting really close to the things that are wrong and therefore closer to the things that are right, by process of elimination. And because we're at this later stage, we've got Jupiter's retrograde. Uranus has gone back into Taurus, which is a big part of it as well. Uranus being in Gemini was very exciting. Like there's this new potential in the air and there's new ideas, new, potential plans, new information arising, even just the idea, even just like AI and even just what some of these advancements in technology have given us. We're starting to see maybe some of these things that are hard aren't hard anymore, or, so there's this air of hope with Jupiter in Cancer, the Uranus Gemini, in terms of our personal lives or potentially being able to change long-standing challenges, because, I think Saturn going from the last sign of the zodiac to the first is very renewing. And I'm hesitant to like see it that way, but it very much seems to be that threshold of that 0 degree Aries and Saturn going over it is like we're kind of at the very, very end of a 30-year journey collectively that we're about to renew and start again with the Neptune involved as well. So I think that we're frustrated, we're tired, we're exhausted. We can't really see what's going to happen next, but we're still having to act. We're still having to do things. We're still having to live. And if we're astrologically aware and we're looking at Saturn Neptune in February next year, then we're like, I don't necessarily doomsday any of these transits. Like I don't look at Saturn Neptune and go, this is going to be horrible. I think the world's experience collectively versus my individual one, two different things. They're not the same. And so the world could go through a challenging time, but do I individually have to? No. And that's what I'm kind of looking at here. So we're in this elastic band phase where Jupiter and Uranus are kind of regressing back, and they're kind of the planets that have given a lot of the, potential for newness and hope and excitement. And so we're kind of going back and kind of, I guess having to revisit some of these things that we feel like we've made some progress with. And as soon as we go back from something that's been good, we feel like it's gone or it's not working or something like that. But it's an elastic band moment where February next year, when Saturn goes into Aries, Jupiter turns direct shortly afterwards, moves forward, and Jupiter's then on site for Leo. There's so much kind of fiery air excitement going on throughout the course of next year. Obviously, the world at large, like we'll get into that. But personally, for all those listening, all those watching, it's basically, I've told one of my clients just recently, it's like, let's just try and enjoy this Sagittarian stuff as much we can while it's still here. Mars has gone to Capricorn. We still have Venus and Mercury in Sag with the Sun being ruled by Jupiter Cancer. There's still a lot of potential to be okay. It just is not in the Saturnian side of things, like not in terms of like management and discipline and all these things. We're kind of exhausted, and we're going to have a boost in energy and activity early next year. So December, January, there's a really interesting double conjunction to the Sun with Venus and Mars in Capricorn early January. That looks pretty interesting. It's because they're with the Sun, they're kind of under the beams, they're kind of out of sight. So it'll be like hidden births of something kind of positive and triumphant going on there. So yeah, my advice to people at the moment is just like, there's going to be things we're going to have to deal with. It's going to be a bit kind of like challenging, but be looking towards February and beyond for some more, I guess, energy, and don't have high expectations of ourselves in these 2 months, because there's only so much we can do. We're more in a reflective, introspective phase. And a lot of us are probably like, yeah, but we're trying to get out of this really hard situation we've been in for ages. Let's go, let's get out of here. But the nature of retrogrades is we're going back into it for a little bit before we get out of it again. So the beauty is that Saturn's now moving forward. So at least there's kind of momentum in that, like the I guess the greater reality that we're experiencing. Saturn's with Neptune, you know, it's complicated, but Saturn in Aries, although Saturn in Aries is a challenging place for Saturn, when we're trying to break free from limitations and change things radically, Saturn in Aries is quite good. And Saturn moves into sextiles with both Uranus and Neptune at the same time. And so there's this kind of like the ability to like for big changes all of a sudden that we probably feel frustrated about now because they're not right in front of us. But if you're looking out into your reality, you would see like the kind of like this, the glimmer of things changing, and that hopefully is enough to get you through to February and beyond. I'm really excited for Jupiter and Leo, like Jupiter and Leo in June. Like that's going to be really cool. It does oppose Pluto as soon as it comes in, which might be intense, but I think Jupiter Pluto is like, I always think of Jupiter Leo as Pink in all of her songs. Just like the best thing we can do is party and enjoy ourselves and be kind of indulgent humans that are here to have a good time. That's what I'm really looking forward to, and the rest of the Jupiter Cancer thing as well. So I hope that makes sense as a what we're experiencing now and looking forward. Yeah.
So
all right. So is my signal bad, Natalie?
You're
good now. It just cut out for a second, so go for it.
Okay, I'll try to go quickly. So one of a few things people that I hear a lot of concern about right now: finances. Everybody's got issues with money at the moment, and wondering about globally too, what's happening with with economies. And the other concern would be AI. Is it taking over all the jobs? Is it going to displace people? So I'm just wondering, do you think that's partly us going through this end of the zodiac time, and we'll start to feel differently when things move to Aries and Jupiter's in Leo? Or what do you think about that in general?
The greater economic situation is probably mostly to do with the fact that we're having a major societal shift in value. What matters, what's important. We're going from that earth to air environment, as I said. And we just lost Natalie. So that earth to air and too easy. Earth to air is we're going from a resource-based economy to an information-based economy. So I think the thing that is most important for me here is the conversation around AI taking jobs and stuff like that. We need to have a more robust view of history and time here, because AI is going to do what digital did to analog. It's going to change the workforce. It's going to change the necessity for work as well. And the economy, unfortunately, is going to have a very choppy, changey time in the middle of this. This is a 250-year cycle ending and a new one beginning. So, and it's tricky too, because we're coming from such a financial dependent element like Earth into air, which is a lot more rational and objective and more interested in effectiveness and kind of the like philosophical integrity and stuff like that. So I wouldn't like the worst thing to do is look at it and go, I'm terrified of what's going to come, because that is in my like it's never going to be as bad as the mind can make it seem, is the first thing. But it's also going to bring a lot of opportunity. That's the thing I want to say, is that it's going to bring a lot of opportunity and new things. And we're all kind of at this phase where we're kind of tired of the way that we're having to live right now. It's late stage capitalism. We're at the very end of what this can give us. There's going to be a sacrifice in the changeover where we're going to have to let go of having financial certainty and having the really solid, like, you know, the 250 years of Earth is like, we all have our own homes, we all have money, we all have the spending power, we all have jobs that are consistent and reliable. It's going to look a lot more flexible and ever changing in the future. And if I guess that fear that Pluto brings at the early degrees of Aquarius is, we're always going to have a fear-based response first, and then the second stage of Pluto is like acceptance, and then the third stage is empowerment. So we've got a 20-year cycle here of dealing with the fact that, you know, the way that the world operates is changing very dramatically. But we need to also look at like Pluto being opposite Leo is like when Aquarius is kind of, I always see Pluto transits as like when we're breaking down something that's been kind of like growing for too long. We're kind of pruning it, we're trimming it back. Like that's what happened with Pluto through Capricorn. A lot of the really like the GFC and everything that came on from that, and how banking became much more scrutinized and all these things, like the darkness of that sign kind of got stripped out, and we start again there. Same thing with Aquarius, where the initial stages, yes, we're going to have a dramatic change in technology that's going to change society as a whole. This is also where the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020 happened. So the work at home phenomena, AI, kind of digital assistants, and all these things. Like, unfortunately, that's just going to grow, and it's only at its very infancy. So we have to accept that life's going to change. The way that we work right now is not going to be the way we work in the future. But does it, being opposite Leo, provide opportunity for the individual to be more of an individual and a more of a human than a worker robot that has to go to work 9 to 5 every single day? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we're kind of fearful of losing the earth element, but what's the air element going to bring? And, you know, the interesting thing in past is that the earth eras always are feudalistic moments where there's top-down economics, where there's lots of rich people and there's a few rich people and lots of poor people. We are kind of lucky that it is the way it is this time around, because it's much more fortunate for the most part, but there's still a lot of poverty and a lot of economic challenges that have kind of stemmed from all of this. But air is a market-based peer-to-peer economy, a peer-to-peer like society, where we are kind of working together socially to kind of make sure everyone's okay. And it's less of a institutional, the government looks after everyone or the government makes all the decisions. It's more moving into community-based living. And that's why that's why the conversations we're having around, like, we got to support each other and live more like connected and that sort of thing. Like, everyone living in their own home and not talking to their neighbor is a very late stage earth problem. And you can see that we're starting to slowly branch out and be like, if we're not helping each other, we're all going to fail, you know? And so that economic, financial uncertainty, distress in the future needs to also be teamed with, what is it going to allow us to do that we haven't had an opportunity to do in the past, that might even just kind of like make it a good sacrifice to make, you know? The unfortunately in the spiritual world too, there's a lot of like that kind of conspiracy minded kind of thinking of like the people that are in control are going to try and control us and keep us here, or digital identity, or whatever. Like, I don't even keep in those circles anymore, but that thinking is kind of that early stage Pluto thinking of like, we're assuming it's going to be bad, but it's going to be fine. Yeah. So we are having this deep cathartic moment, but that's my thing, is like AI could potentially make being human much better as well. Like, if we've got all of this kind of rudimentary menial tasks being handled by our technology, then do we get to go and like have our like natural lives without having to spend all of our time, you know, working all the time? Like, I don't know. It depends which way you look at it. But I think that needs to be the approach we take when we have a look at the future. And yeah, is there conflict coming? Is there major challenges and global unrest and stuff like that? Yeah, most likely. But to assume it's going to affect you dramatically is not a good place to start. You know, there's going to be people that are going to be unfortunate based on their relationship to the universe and have extenuating circumstances, which is not good. And there's going to be people that don't. So like, don't assume that you're going to have a hard time through this. You might actually it might actually change your life for the better. You know, I think the people that are going to probably have the most, like the hardest time with this, is people that are very earth dominant, because they're going to struggle with letting go of certainty and control and financial power and all these things. We're going to have to learn to be a lot more flexible and adaptable and, you know, on our feet than, you know, having a 10, 15, 20-year plan. Because the world's changing already so quickly, and we're only in the first 5 years of it, out of a 250-year cycle. So it's like, I mean, I can't help but just be excited about it. I think, but that's also because I don't have any earth placements.
None at all.
I do have some earth placements, but
yeah,
but I'm still
and it's always nuanced. Yeah, I mean, you're a Gemini rising I believe your sun in Aries, Anne?
No, that's
no, Libra. Yeah, anyway, so double air, you know, so there you go. And you've even got moon air. So like, I'm predominant fire, water, air. And the only earth placement I have is my South Node in Taurus, which is obviously you know, depicts moving away from or being less kind of dominant in. Like, I grew up in a very materially, like, I guess, abundant home, but my Scorpio North Node pulled me straight out of it. I decided to leave that safety for in my mind, my ego would say integrity. But yeah, so there's a lot. And I guess, I mean, if we have any more, do you have any more questions before we get like fully into 2026? Or
just to follow up on that, is I think one of the things is that I always imagined, AI could take over menial tasks, but now we're seeing it taking over creative tasks, you know, like music especially, or writing, or art, right? And that I didn't anticipate on this level. So I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Can I just add one point to that before you actually answer? So I've got a girlfriend that works in marketing, and she was saying they're so reliant on AI now. And when you go through the hiring process, you've got to be able to use AI, all of that. And my girlfriend is a genius at what she does. And she calls me and says, AI is so helpful. When we get an image that's almost perfect, where we would have had to reshoot or go find something else, it can fill in and make it, you know, a longer version, so we can use it for a banner as opposed to just a social media post or anything like that. But what she pointed out is that all of the advertising is starting to look the same. They're not trusting human brains to come up with these incredible advertising campaigns. So everything that we're seeing is very same.
Yeah. Again, this is very early stage Pluto stuff, where it's like, oh no, this thing that we used to rely on has changed dramatically. I think that the creative side of things is there's always going to be a demand for humanness. There's always going to be demand for Leo, the indefinable star quality of the individual doing something. You know, it's not perfect, but it's just kind of like cool because it's like, you know, I've got a Leo Mars. It's like the way that you do it. I like that. like that kind of that thing. That's always going to be a player. I think that the also, yeah, I don't know. It just bounces back and forth for me between Aquarius and Leo. It's like things that happen in Aquarius allow for something different in Leo as well. And so like when we're not wasting our time on some things that used to take us a long time, that we can go and put that time and energy into something else. And we will, because we're humans and we always adapt and we always change and we always find a way to express our creativity. I think we're going to have to be very like, I think that it'll kind of, I think what will happen is that, yeah, for a time, it'll challenge a lot of these industries. I think even the use of the word industry is probably going to be challenged. Like, I don't think we're going to have the same like workforces that we used to have. And it's going to be more like when all these things are so easy, the beautiful thing is to go and find something human and raw and real, you know? And so like that, the creative side of it, I don't think will be like a long-term issue. I just think it's a kind of like, we can do this now. This is cool. And we're going to have this overlap of earth and air, where we've got the earth, which is all about marketing and like sales and resources and selling and material and products. And then air's like thoughts and ideas and technologies and expression and, you know, intellectual expression and, you know, thinking. Like, you know, it's just going to be a different kind of reality that we can't conceptualize yet. That's still going to be valid and real and fine. So, you know, it will obviously create challenges and hardship for people. Like if someone's a musician that makes money writing songs and AI takes over and does that for them, they will have to adapt and they'll have to do something else. But that'll also be something timed in their chart that, you know, has a meaningful trajectory for them as well. Like it's, you know, we kind of need to think with this sort of stuff, we need to think a little bit more long term and accept whatever the sacrifice that we give to the collective going forward. So it's like, yeah, this is, you know, it's very interesting talking about this specifically to individuals, because it's like, well, what's Pluto and Aquarius really doing for you? Or what's the new air age, you know, doing for you? Like I have a lot of clients that I've had to coach through, like recognizing that having the dream of, I don't know, like having a very earth oriented dream for the future might not be realistic. You know, being like, well, I want to, I don't know, like I'm trying to figure out one. Like, I mean, buying a home is the first thing that comes to mind. And it's not necessarily like home ownership is going to go away. It will change. But maybe potentially like looking 20, 30 years in the future and having like a savings goal or some sort of like, you know, basing our future plans on something that was reasonable and possible now, but might not be then. Like, you know, really having to shed our expectations of the future and let it happen, so to speak, which is a very non-earth thing to do. But again, specific to the individual.
Okay, so what are your biggest predictions in terms of the entire energy of 2026, and what are the big markers for you throughout the year?
Yeah, well, the main one is Saturn-Neptune. We've already been experiencing Saturn-Neptune for some time. Like the co-presence of Saturn-Neptune started back in March 2023 when Saturn went into Pisces. They were both in Pisces for the first time. And we've had this elongated kind of like really long timeline of Saturn-Neptune slowly coming closer and closer together. They got within like a degree in earlier this year, and then started separating again. But now, yeah, Saturn-Neptune happening on the 13th of February will be the first exact conjunction, and they will still have another 2.5 years of time together in Aries. So this is the lead up to the transit is always like all the context that kind of informs the event that happens at the conjunction. So we've still been in that phase of like all of the global events that are kind of like shaping the context in which the event will change and move to whatever the new reality is beyond that. That's the main thing. And if I was to speak to that just generally, like we're seeing, I like to think about it as the last time we had Saturn Neptune happen in Capricorn in 1989. And that was where a lot of institutional government-based stuff happened, where we realized the government, like there was a lot of government negligence that was uncovered at that time. There was also a lot of conservation efforts that came from that, like our whole kind of natural, like, you know, looking after the world, eco stuff came from Saturn, Neptune, and Capricorn. And we saw Tiananmen Square, like in China, happen. We realized, oh, China's abusing their people, and Saturn, Neptune was also the US, the Soviet Union falling, and that was not expected at the time. So there's always something that's just like out of left field, never saw that coming about Saturn, Neptune, which had been happening behind the scenes for a long time. And so that Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, we think about the difference between Saturn and Capricorn, Saturn and Aries. Saturn, Capricorn's very conservative, very consistent, sturdy, reliable, institutional, kind of foundational and basis. So like, you think it was mostly about government behavior and our kind of like morals and ethics and how we should structure society to improve for the future. The Berlin Wall was also brought down. So there was a lot of kind of like dissolution of boundaries, literally, with the Berlin Wall. And then also the Soviet Union. So what we're going to see here is more Aries based. And if we think about the difference between Capricorn and Aries is much more individual. Aries is much more people before anything else, me before anything else, every man for themselves kind of energy. And so you can see the closing down of borders. You can see the rejecting of external foreign things. We can see everything in especially Europe, where like the immigration policy, America's immigration policy, we're starting to get very separationist about things, which is very Aries. And there's going to be something around the Saturn Neptune that's going to be about that, where we're trying to find our identity again after an extended period of dissolving it into we're all one and we all exist. We're all the same, which when you think about it objectively, subjective experiences aside, makes sense. It makes sense that when we kind of like, I mean, America's borders, for instance, like America's borders were just wide open, and there was problems with that too. And obviously the extreme here is also just as bad. But we're trying to mediate and figure out how to do borders, how to do separation properly. You know, we don't want to lose our culture, our identity, our freedom as individuals, because we need to kind of water ourselves down to make ourselves available for everyone. There's this question here of like, how do we reclaim our identity and independence again? So that's going to be a big one. In Aries, it's Martian, it's more militant, it's more aggressive, it's more like again, separationalist. So there's actual force being applied with Saturn, Neptune in Aries. And I think in America, probably it's more evident than anything. But we also just had the Bondi event that just happened here. And Australia is an Aries rising nation. So we have Aries built in. We have big problems around domestic violence and, you know, masculine challenges in Australia. In like also Aries being kind of like alcohol abuse issues and these inabilities to regulate action, being impulsive and reckless. So it's very evident here, especially, that there's a great sense of like, and we're so multicultural too. Like, I'm sure America's kind of similar, but there's just so many things to want to separate from here. And so that's very loud. So Saturn Neptune is the biggest thing that's happening by far. And what's also interesting is that Pluto is in Aquarius being ruled by it at the same time. So we have this technological charge behind it of like, because of new tools and new technologies and new possibilities in the world, we are able to do the Saturn Aries thing in a different, very, like, I mean, Saturn Neptune and Pluto are all sextiling each other. So there's a very tight relationship between them all, where our ability to monitor and kind of our surveillance capacity and, you know, technology is allowing us to be more separate and allowing us to kind of, you know, so you can see how all the things that are happening kind of are explained by that. For the individual, again, I don't necessarily think looking at the world stage and thinking that that's what's going to be happening to me is a good idea. But that will be, that 13th of Feb moment will be a really interesting time for what the world looks like now, because Saturn deals with truth, Neptune dissolves. So we're kind of leaving the world that we knew, which had been building since 1989, which was that very kind of like certain, stable, solid reality where, like, honestly, not much has changed in societal structures in the last 30 years, but that's going to change dramatically because now we've got Saturn in Aries, which is this unlimited change. Like Saturn in Aries is no control over the change, or it's like so rapid and relentless. So yeah, very fiery. The interesting thing that happens straight afterwards is Aquarius has its first eclipse of the Aquarius Leo axis coming in 3-4 days later, and it's a new moon. And it's also kind of like an interesting preview to late stage Pluto because it's at 28 degrees of Aquarius. So it's kind of like giving us a snapshot of what the end of Pluto Aquarius is going to look like and where we're kind of headed. So in that, I would expect a lot of interesting developments with what AI and all of these technological advancements are going to do to society. I think that the anxiousness of some people is like, you know, government overreach and power with the technology. Like if a government has access to the ability to see everything we're doing all of a sudden, then yeah, the anxiousness is that they're going to use that to their advantage. I think that there will be a period of time where that is true, but that will only be a brief period of time. So there's going to be an interesting kind of overlap between that. And then when, you know, there's always a feeling of like when Aquarius transits happen that the people benefit somehow. The people eventually get power brought to them. And that centralized forces struggle, which is this, you know, I guess the centralized entity of, you know, the government, but also the centralized thinking kind of gets challenged by that too. So very interested about that Aquarius eclipse. That's going to be kind of, I think that moment, that 4-day period is probably the most interesting part of the whole year, and that everything will kind of like be, I guess, follow on from that. Saturn will then kind of reach about 14 degrees of Aries before he goes backwards again. So anyone that has up to 14 degrees of cardinal signs will be kind of central to that development. And then the next thing after that, that eclipse series then turns into a Pisces eclipse, a Pisces full moon, which will be one of the last ones, if not the last one, on the 3rd of March. And that one's pretty straightforward. We've been doing Pisces eclipses now for a year already. Got some more time with that coming, but we're already kind of stepping into that next thing. I think it's really incredible that we're going to go into an Aquarius Leo axis eclipse, nodal axis at the same time we're having all this Aquarius like stuff. Like a lot of the anticipation of this technological era we're moving into will probably be accelerated through the course of the year because of that, and then especially into 2027. So the main thing with 2026 is that Saturn Neptune we've been waiting for almost 2 years. So 24 was kind of like we could feel that the levels have been stepping up since then. Next year is like kind of central, like ground zero of what we're probably going to see as the most historical time in maybe 10 years time, where we're kind of society has changed so much and we can look back to this moment and go, yeah, that was where it like was really happening. And a lot of the events that happen in the next couple of months you can see how it's already happening. I'd like to think that Saturn, Neptune, both stationing direct and moving forward with Mars's influence in Sagittarius last Tuesday. And Mars squared Neptune and that Bondi event happened. Like we're starting to see all of the preeminent activity to the main event. So like we can't necessarily talk about this without the challenging part of it, which is there's going to be a lot of aggression and violence and changes to structures and the way things are that is going to move to more Aries. And it's really interesting. The last two Saturn Neptunes have been in very Saturn dominant signs, Libra and Capricorn. This is the first one that Saturn's not in a very fun place. But I think that's more exciting in the sense that, you know, institutions and longstanding controlling limiting factors for society can actually break and fully break. And sometimes that breaks in a, you know, I think that, sorry, I've got so many thoughts about all this, but I think also the men's loneliness conversation is a big one with Saturn and Aries, where we're having men that are just completely disempowered, just can't get up and do what they should do. And this is a big part of that as well. It's like we've got a very vulnerable world because the men in the world feel disempowered. and the men are the ones that men's role in society is to protect women and children, and kind of like hold suffering and pain for the sake of the comfort and peace of children and women. But we have men that are more single men than ever, and more independent women acting masculine than ever. And this is a tricky conversation, obviously, because it depends on what you think about roles and who's supposed to play what role. But Saturn in Aries is very militant, and I think that it's going to get a lot of men up off of their feet, maybe potentially in good ways and bad ways. But I think that conversation around men's role in the world and that sort of thing, I think men are going to realize their purpose again, and that they're protectors, and that they're here to actually steward society to safety, essentially. And so it's probably high time that happened. And my own personal like growth as a man and stuff like that, it's been a very hard time to know what to do as a dude, because, you know, women are doing kind of the same thing as us. They can provide for themselves. They can do what they want for themselves, which is amazing. But there's an element of like negative, like it's a challenge. It's not necessarily, it's so hard to talk about, but I see that the truth and the beauty of the traditional male-female relationship, and obviously still encapsulating the full spectrum of what relationships are. I'm not saying that that's the only way that people can relate, but that beautiful, I guess, ideal of the man and woman and their relationship towards each other is going to probably be reinstated through the course of this, because men are going to be the ones that have to do the fighting on, like, you know, protecting ourselves from the threats that are coming up, both figuratively and actually. So I can't help but feel excited. I don't know if I'm joined by a lot of people in that, but I think that a lot of the necessary hardships that we have, you know, the weak times, you know, good times create weak men, strong hard times create good men. Like, that's the kind of period we're going into, where there's going to be challenges that men go through, that women need us for, that we're going to rise up and challenge, and we're going to feel like we're valuable again. And we're not going to feel so disempowered, because we're going to have an opportunity to show what our, what we're here to do. So there's also, the other one that I'm really excited about is Jupiter Leo, which is obviously going to be really important, because Jupiter and Saturn are then going to be in this beautiful fire trine relationship, where there's so much passion and desire and yearning for triumph and overcoming, that kind of like really helps, I guess, put a lot of pressure back, I guess, where we probably are more fearful in what's about to happen. And Jupiter Leo opposing Pluto trining Saturn is this kind of uprising, this you know, an opportunity, like when the system fails, you know. And I think we always see in moments where there's a destitution amongst the population, where we kind of start rioting and we start kind of trying to rip everything down, and, you know, rising against the power, or all those sort of things. This transit, to me, Jupiter and Leo, is like, we can make something of this. We can do something about it. We can improve the world off the back of this challenge, you know. And I think that Jupiter Pluto opposition is going to feel like a very, like, it's necessary for us to suddenly grow and rise to whatever challenge that we're being faced with. And I think that we'll be better. I think we'll be so much better off for it. I don't even think it's very much in the long term. I think that we will be kind of, by the end of 2026, the world will be different. We might still have, you know, some great ongoing challenges collectively, but I think that the direction will be much clearer. And I think that the benefits will also be, you know, the things that we could be hopeful for, because Jupiter in Cancer is already building up this hopefulness of, like, if we want something, then what's the problem with just wanting it and going for it? That's something that's really loud in the individuals' lives that I'm reading for at the moment. You know, people are starting to just ask for what they want, both figuratively and actually, and realizing that they decide. You know, this is that kind of manifestation idea of, like, you decide what's real or what's possible by wanting it, you know, wanting it and asking for it, acting towards it. hoping for it. So there's this big kind of Jupiter and Cancer, Leo kind of hopefulness building that I think is going to really kind of mitigate a lot of what might otherwise be an austere time or a challenging time. It's really hard to talk about next year without talking about challenges, because it is a very challenging year underneath it all. But I think a lot of people are just tired of how the world's worked up until this point. So this is the necessary evil, so to speak, of things have to break down and change and just be disrupted to allow for something better to come. And that's what history and time and nature and space always does, creation, destruction. And so that's just the necessary kind of pathway for us to go through next year. But it's been much more challenging probably in the lead up to it than the aftermath of it as well, because we're having to deal with a society that isn't working anymore and is deeply, deeply challenged. And then potentially the opportunity to create one that isn't. I think on the Pluto Aquarius, it's also really interesting because Pluto Aquarius times are always times where China becomes a really dominant force technologically in the world, and you can see that happening already. Generally, it equalizes things and makes the world a more equal place rather than one dominant force that controls the whole world like America has. It probably will be very humbling for America in terms of geopolitical, economic things. I think that Trump is probably beating his chest, thinking that they're in the undefeatable. But the time we're in is that usually China and other forces in the world become more dominant. And so there's going to have to be, I guess, a little bit of a ceding of power going on. And I think it's evident already. I mean, the main thing is that AI war between China and who has the most power, and this kind of thing with all the AI companies where they're just kind of generating money that doesn't exist. That's our new military force, is that we're just printing money to make AI so that whoever has the most advanced technology will be the winner of this race. And it's also important to note that Russia is always a big player in Saturn-Neptune periods. So we've got all of these things happening at once. We're in a very interesting period in time. And if I sit back and get out of my subjective suit, the popcorn's out. But obviously there'll be things to I guess manage. And the kind of on a much more gentle, lighter note, the other thing I'm looking at is the Venus retrograde later in the year. There's going to be one from Scorpio to Libra in November. Very interesting. And Venus going from detriment in Scorpio to its air sign home of Libra. That will be a very interesting time for societal standards and values changing, and potentially a good moment for that moment of we've all kind of been a bit tense, and we've all been fighting Scorpio. We're all been kind of a little bit skeptical of each other. There's this great tension that is kind of overlaying the world. Then the Venus Scorpio, Venus Leo, we always see, Venus Scorpio, Venus Libra. We always see some sort of social revolt with Venus retrogrades, where the most recent one I can remember is Venus Leo, where we had Barbie and the feminist kind of all the female revolt, where suddenly it was really an amazing time to be a woman, and also a lot of conversations around women's rights and all these things came up around that time. So in Scorpio Libra, it's going to be a little bit more I think it'll be in conjunction with that conversation around men, and then potentially men getting it, men kind of rising to the occasion and being hey, we need to be strong, integrity-based people that are defending the comfort. Because I always see the relationship between man and woman, the sun and moon, as the sun's here to kind of see the condition of reality, and the woman being more the earth and nature, and kind of seeing the condition and acting based upon that. That's what a full moon is that culmination moment of full visibility. And so I think at this point in time, it's seeing the opportunity of bringing harmony and restoring some peace after a period of challenge. And that's Scorpio to Libra. So I think that's a really nice moment towards the end of the year to look forward to. And underneath all that, we have the Uranus-Pluto trine making its first main contact in August. So very, very it's hard to talk succinctly about next year, there's so much going on, and so, again, so much to look forward to. Obviously, some stuff that looks quite challenging, but I think we're probably mostly just kind of being like, rip the Band-Aid off. Let's go get into it so that we can get out of it, so to speak. I don't want to keep just talking. I'd love to hear, I guess, if there's any questions or anything else you want to talk more detail into.
I have just a couple of questions, and one of them, I just wanted to touch on the masculinity thing. And so this isn't necessarily astrologically based, but I think it's such an important topic. And I've spoken to many girlfriends, and I have a feeling Anne has something she wants to ask or add about this. So I'm not speaking for Anne. She'll jump in with her bit. But for me, I think I always said I was a feminist, but in recent times I've stepped away from that label because I don't like how far it's gone. And I feel like there's an imbalance between the masculine and feminine. And I think men have been very disempowered because there are so many people screaming about patriarchy and toxic masculinity. And I think those two things can exist while we can still have good men being masculine and being in the divine masculine while women are in the divine feminine. And there is a push for women to be incredibly masculine at the moment. And I always use myself as an example because we're obviously all made up of yin and yang, and there's meant to be a balance within us. But as a woman, I'm meant to live this life in the divine feminine. Having been single for so long, people would go, oh, you give them very masculine energy and you've got to sort of dial it back. And the reality is when you're living as a single woman, you have to step up and you have to take care of things because otherwise nothing will happen. But when you meet a partner who is healthy and loving and in their divine masculine, I'm able to go back to existing in the divine feminine because I don't have to take care of myself anymore. Not in the same way, because there's this human that's catching me. And so I'm excited to hear that there may be this restorative balance. And I'm sure there are some people that are watching and thinking that I'm insane and, fuck the patriarchy. But
I think that the two things we're talking about, like the patriarchy being this systemic prioritization of control and having things stay the same, which is essentially the patriarchy is like, it's just like, I always see as like I'm a big fan of Graham Hancock and his like the archaeology kind of archetype of like, we don't want to disprove what's been proven because we don't want to disrespect the elders of our tradition. Like that's what we're really struggling with here is we don't want to kind of stray away from what's already happened because then we would be, I guess, disconnecting from tradition or disconnecting from the way things have been for a very long time. But we're in that stage anyway. But the whole masculine thing is, I think the humbling moment for men right now is that they're not here for themselves. And I think that, their needs, their comfort, their wants, their joy are secondary. Men aren't here necessarily to have a good time. Men are here to protect the safety of women and children, as I've said. And that's their divine purpose. If you say divine masculine, it's like, I'm not searching for comfort or joy or peace. I'm searching to fight the threat to those things, which means that I'm in challenge and pressure and stress. Like we're built for it. We rise every day and go, like we rise with the sun, go down with the sun. Like our cycle is daily. We are here to just be under pressure. And the reason why is not for our own, like this is truly tricky because the patriarchy of like entrepreneurial type men that have like their career is their woman, their career is their wife. Like there's actually the reason why that doesn't make men happy is because it's not their purpose, And so the divine or the masculine kind of rising is and this whole kind of like male loneliness epidemic, which like every man is involved in some way, shape or form, is this kind of thing of being like, I need to be looked after first before I can get better. And it's like, that's the opposite. You need to push forward feeling the way you're feeling and have like some sort of like goal in mind that isn't like, I'm going to make a business and I'm going to make this much money. Like, and it's like, I know I want to create a container in my life for a woman and children to come into, where they can find peace and joy and safety, because women are supposed to enjoy that. Not like that's women create culture, women create like comfort and peace and all these words, and men defend it. So if we have a world of men seeking comfort and stability and safety, who's fighting for peace? Who's fighting for that? No one. Men are trying to escape into comfort. That's why we have this male loneliness epidemic, and it's all systemically designed to be this way right now. That's the astrology of this moment. But Saturn in Aries is a great opportunity for men to rise up and find purpose again, and it's not going to be for themselves. It's not going to be because men are this way because they aren't motivated by their own self-interests. They from, I guess you could say they look like they are from this point of view, but there's this kind of whole generational development that we've had since maybe even World War II, where men kind of struggled and suffered through the war, like the wartime, and even to Vietnam and all those things, where men were kind of damaged and they had to be taken care of because they went and fought. But they're kind of coming out of that, like, we need to be looked after now, and we need to get back out on the front lines. And I'm not talking just like combat. I'm just saying the front lines of society and protecting the interests of women and children, because that's where the greatest amount of satisfaction and fulfillment comes from, man, is to see that, like, I mean, I'm a father of 3 girls and partner, and I'm very much still in this journey. I'm not perfect and I'm not there yet, but it's been a big learning curve for me of being like, I am more effective as a man when my centralized, purpose is my partner and my children need things, and it's my job to go and find them. And it's not just money, it's like emotional safety, it's physical safety, it's material things that make their lives easier. Women aren't meant to live in hardship. That's the tricky thing. And that's the humbling thing for men too, is whenever I see a man trying to be like, hey, what's your purchase in the situation? Like trying to act like we're totalitarian equals. Like you need to work as hard as I do. Like as soon as we're measuring the efforts, especially because men come from the perspective of like labor, women don't work that way. Women are laborious in the more maternal Cancerian Taurus sense of like making things nice and comfortable and happy and peaceful. I keep coming back to these words because that's the role. And so that's, if you're speaking divine masculine, divine feminine, I think that's exactly what Saturn in Aries is the call for men to realize their role again. And Saturn is the planet that represents masculinity in its most mature sense. And it's the elder wise father figure, the grandfather figure, even potentially, of like, it's not about my experience, it's about theirs. And it's about the community. It's about who I'm in charge of, who I'm responsible for, who relies on me. And the Saturn Capricorn transit of recent times, the 1989 one, not recent times, when like it kind of instituted this kind of like order of conservatism and like it's like a masculine planet, Saturn in a feminine sign, Capricorn, which I always say is like even though Saturn rules Capricorn, it does not mean that Saturn is only good in Capricorn. Like Saturn is actually more comfortable in Aries because it's a diurnal planet. Not Aries, Aquarius, because it's a diurnal planet, diurnal sign. There's a lot of darkness that came from that, which was the conservatism and the fearfulness of Capricorn, which is like, I don't want things to go wrong. I'm not willing to fight. I'm not willing to take risks, which is very anti-masculine. And so Saturn in Aries presents like this really beautiful moment for men to learn how to be risky and to learn how to challenge themselves again, and to just go. Like, I think the archetype of war, unfortunately, is so loud for Aries, where it's like, men just had to go and take a gun and run out into the field and see how it went. That's kind of the experience that men need to learn their strength and power again. And I'm not saying that it has to be in a war sense. Unfortunately, it might be for some. But I think there's going to be many ways that shows up for men, where it's like, if you know, like my partner's going to leave me because I'm not defending her, and then I'm like, well, I don't want that to happen, so I'll just do what I've got to do, run out into the field with the gun. You know, that's the kind of dynamic that men need, and I think it's a perfect time and a perfect transit for that. And I think that women don't want to be fiercely independent. Women don't want to not rely on people. Like, women need it. And the nervous systems, I think that the health of women right now is a big indicator of how much this is needed, because women aren't meant to be burning the candle at both ends. They're meant to be resting and nurturing and being like, you know, having time and space and freedom to work with their cycle as well, which is another important thing, that the 9 to 5 for women is not good, like not good for their bodies, not good for their mentality, not good for the way that they live. Is, you know, I'm sure that you guys probably agree. So yeah, I think that that's a great aspect. I think we could expect a lot from men in the coming years, and hopefully by the time Saturn Aries is finished, the male loneliness epidemic's turned into the male empowerment project, you know. So I'm hopeful for that.
And did you have a question on this topic? Oh, she's frozen. She was there a second ago.
Oh no.
She's been messaging me saying my signal's not great. So, okay.
Oh,
so
no.
the other thing that I wanted to
Thanks,
ask.
Mercury and Sagittarius.
Oh, she's back. She's blinking.
Oh, hello. Hey.
I'm here, but I don't think I have a great signal yet.
Well, we can hear you, so go for it. Oh. And there it goes. Okay.
Oh no. Okay.
So the other thing I wanted. Oh no, she's back. Okay.
Hopefully I'm back. I just was wanting to say, you know, on the feminine aspect of that also, that it's a challenge. See, what I feel that has been missing so much in the world from the masculine perspective is just that sense of leadership, of having someone step up and not be fearful to take a direction and to actually lead, without taking 1,000 polls and figuring out who can you not offend. And
how's that?
You know,
how much is that Capricorn too? Like, I just want to add that that's just the Capricorn element, and I think it's a really good like way of like understanding how these things can change really radically based on these cycles ending. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but there's the Capricorn element there of like taking polls, having a massive government with 1 million people all trying to make the same decision. Like, that's the thing that we're probably gonna step away from. I think Elon Musk's kind of idea of like, let's strip the government, let's take all these people out of the government and make it a more streamlined system. I'm not a massive Elon Musk proponent, but that's kind of the Saturn Aries energy of just let's simple and quick. But I'm sorry, I want to continue what you were saying. Sorry.
No, I just was going to say that as a woman also who's had to work in those environments and who's been expected to act like a man in my job, it was exhausting. You know, I recently stepped back from a job because I just was tired of working and living in that way. But it is also when a lot of women are surrounded by men who don't see their job as being traditionally masculine, I suppose. So I do understand the male loneliness. It was difficult also raising a son, going through some of this and seeing him be devalued. That's a really difficult thing as a parent to be dealing with. But on the other hand too, it's also lonely for women who are looking for men who will step up. So I just was going to throw that out there.
I think the Saturn Pisces transit that we've just been through is the fuel to this change. And that's why it's gotten deeper. That's why it's gotten more existential. It's like, you know, I think men are searching for meaning and purpose, and the society we've been in hasn't really been that meaningful or purposeful for a while now. So there's not really any meaning, like, you know, like men have to provide, like in this day and age, men have to provide with a job, and they have to know what they want to do for career. And, you know, to have that container for the woman to step into is a lot harder these days, you know, to have financial power. You know, not everyone is a super dominant business minded person either. So like, if you're just a mechanic making no money, like, how are you supposed to create a container for a woman to come in and have that safety and peace and comfort? Like, it's much harder for, like, I see it from both perspectives. It's much harder for men to be men than it ever has been. But also, we're kind of on that Pisces Aries precipice where it's going to polarize and flip, and suddenly the world changes. This is the exciting part, is the world changes in a dramatic way. Therefore, the opportunity comes with that, of like when everything's shaken up and changing, then there's new places to go and new things to do and new opportunities. And I think whatever AI does in terms of jobs and stuff like that, and society and economics, will provide opportunities for men to, you know, gain power and control in their lives again, and be able to have an ideal. Because I know my personal journey with it is like, I've looked out into the world, be like, how am I supposed to do all the things that I want to see my children and partner do? How am I supposed to create that for them in this world? You know, how am I to become a millionaire and be able to provide that for them? That's the kind of challenge that men have looked out into the world, and we've gotten quite displaced and we've gotten quite like, you know, sunken and depressed because the opportunities just haven't been there. So I think that there's I think that's what we're looking forward to in the coming years, is the world changing in a way that men can rise up and have power again. Yeah, I feel you though with your son and that sort of thing. Like it's also from that perspective, like having women just be like, men suck, it's not fun either. And it's not fair either. I think that there's a joint role in this as well. And yeah, it'll be very interesting to see the coming years.
Well, Anne, do you have any more questions about the year ahead?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, what an amazing job you did covering it. I don't know if you've ever watched the show before, but Anne and I always like to finish off when guests are on here for the first time with the same 4 questions that we ask every person.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I will kick us off first and ask, what makes you laugh?
What makes me laugh? Oh, that's a good question. Being Scorpio dominant, laughter has always been. My partner and I love The Office, and we basically yell Office references at each other all the time, and that just cracks me up. I love it. And she introduced me to The Office. I was otherwise very like, actually, this is something that happens all the time. She'll introduce something really awesome to me, and I'll be like, and then eventually it'll be my favorite thing. And that's the like The Office and many other references and stuff like that. Yeah.
All right, great. I'm back in time for the second question, and I hope I'm not cutting you off.
No.
Who was your biggest spiritual influence?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, my biggest spiritual influence. I feel like there is a definite winner that I'm just struggling to get to. I'll give a notable reference to the astrologer that kind of I latched onto and started learning from, which was Chris Brennan, who's actually was one of the astrologers that helped bring traditional Hellenistic astrology back. He's got a book called Hellenistic Astrology, The Study of Fate and Fortune. He's not a very spiritual person, but he's very stoic and has a great penchant for like philosophy and, you know, what does astrology teach us? How can we see the world through astrology? So that's one. And I feel like recently a lot of the people that I followed have kind of gone in a direction that I'm not really supportive of anymore or don't vibe with anymore. So yeah, I think I'll leave it with Chris Brennan. Sorry for waffling.
And what would your advice be to people on how to transcend fear?
I think that I posted on my stories just recently that fear, anxiety, and anxiousness about the future are all symptoms of not seeing reality clearly. And we're talking about reality as objectively as we can see it. So I think that that's actually the depth of my work is showing people reality through the lens of traditional astrology, and therefore by seeing it exposed to exposure therapy, you know, the world looks less scary when you can see it clearly. Because I think that one of my main clients has major anxiousness and fear and is a really high performance person, but lives constantly and just, I'm terrified of the next moment of everything falling apart. But when you see the world through astrology and you realize that there are parameters and limits and, you know, I can't make a decision to completely ruin my life tomorrow. It's just not possible. So you take those things out of your conscious perspective, and therefore, like, you know, half the stuff that we worry about that's never going to happen suddenly starts to fall away. So that, yeah, I think that's
great. All right. So what's the best piece of spiritual advice that you've ever been given?
that I've ever been given. My partner, she's a 9th house Pisces stellium. Pretty much everything she's ever given me advice wise has been perfect. She's really helped me. I can't come up with one piece of advice, but anytime that I'm ever in a situation where I'm feeling really challenged, or my Leo Mars is really going hard and I'm feeling like resentful and angry at the world, it would just be distilled down into like, why did you expect that? You know, why did you expect that thing to happen? Why were you so attached to it? How did you let yourself become so expectant of something that wasn't kind of guaranteed? And that realm of advice has been the most helpful for me. Like, you know, that's one part where the spiritual world can kind of be challenging, is like, it's great to be hopeful for the future, but like managing your expectations is still probably the best thing that you can do both ways, you know, bringing yourself up from really low points and also not shooting super high. Because I've seen a lot of my clients come through that were trying to be really spiritual or trying to follow spiritual advice and just being like, I'm like, this is making me feel worse than it's making me feel better. Having this really hopeful, optimistic mindset. Not to say that we need to have pessimistic ones either, but yeah.
Great.
Amazing. So on social media, your handle is Ascend with Pete. Where can people book a reading? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way to initiate with me is just by sending me a DM. And we can have a chat, or if you are interested in booking a reading, you can go straight to my booking link and book a reading. It's on my page there. But I also like chatting too, so you're more than welcome to send me a message and you know, ask any questions or anything like that. But yeah, book through the link on my Instagram page.
Amazing. And everybody who's watching this after the live ends, I will make sure I get all the links up there so that you can just click on that and go directly to Peter's profile. So thank you so much for joining Anne and I for this final episode in 2025. And if you're willing, we would love to have you back in 2026 and we'll delve into some other topics.
Mm-hmm.
And Anne, thank you so much for doing this with me all of this year. I've had so much fun and I love doing this with you, and I cannot wait for 2026 and all that we have lined up.
Well, thank you, Natalie. And thanks, Pete.
Thank you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And I'd love to come back. So let me know. Have a good Christmas, guys.
Amazing.
All right. Happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Bye.
See you guys.